program. You know, my name is Sarah McCombs. And you may have no reason at all to know me, except if when you come to the ball games on Friday night, you might hear a voice at some point during the halftime that says, "And now on your feet, Dragon fans, it's the sound of the Dragons." That's me. And other than being the mouth of the Dragons, and I've been accused of being the breath of the Dragons, I don't know if that means bad breath or good, I don't know. I'm a teacher here at Carroll High School and a member of the Historical Society, and both groups would like to welcome you. You know, I was in school as a Colleyville resident many, many years ago, but it was at the time when the state legislature passed a bill that said that all small K-8 or 1-8 schools at that time either had to consolidate with a larger school district or become independent. I had started school at Pleasant Run Elementary, which was the equivalent of what we called Chigger Hill, Carroll. Our only rival in anything was Carroll Hill, or Chigger Hill, as we called it at the time. Well, when that election came, my dad voted as he always did, and he was an avid sports fan and a supporter of schools and everything my sister and I did. Colleyville voted to join Grapevine School District, and that was how Daddy voted. Carroll, though, voted to become independent. My daddy thought that was the most stupid thing anybody could do. How could those farmers out there think they were ever going to have a decent school system? How could they ever get enough kids together to play football? Well, before Daddy died, he became one of Carroll's most avid fans, and I'm glad he saw that day. So we're in for some real treats tonight. I'll be in my place on Friday nights this year. It's been my pleasure to be there every Friday night almost until December for the last 20 years. We're going to do it again, right, Todd? So I'll see you there. And I look forward to that. Tonight, maybe among the few people in the room who's as great a fan of Carroll Dragon football as I am, is going to be our MC. Mr. Phil Barber has a long life as a fan here at Carroll, and he's a member of the Dragon Council. Won't you welcome Phil Barber?
Sarah, and welcome to a very short, and I mean very short, history of South Lake Carroll football. Very few schools in the state of Texas can match Carroll when discussing football and the success of its program. What makes for a successful football program? Is it the number of wins? Is it the number of state championships? Is it the number of outstanding athletes? Not at all. Over the years, many times, the competition has greater athletes on the field than Carroll. Just to name a few: Gainesville, Vernon, Dangerfield, Lufkin, Allen, and I can keep on talking. What makes Carroll football so successful? It's all about team and the team concept. A team that is totally dedicated to the success of the football program. A team that is not interested in individual accomplishments, but only the team concept. A group of athletes that are not only successful on the football field, but in the classroom as well. And a group of outstanding coaches with emphasis on sportsmanship, integrity, and respect. So keep this in mind when listening to these guest speakers and watching the team pictures and the game film. It's all about team over me. Now to begin the program, in the order in which we'll go, we're going to show some films broken down into three eras, beginning in 1959 and ending in 1978, beginning in 79 and ending in 1999, and beginning in 2000 and ending current time. We will begin with the team photos from the first era and then have the guest speakers. Okay, Nick? break the next section down into two speakers. Our first speaker began with his career in Westminster, Texas in 1949. After military service, was in Clarendon, Texas for the 1956-57 school year. He came to Carroll in 1957 as principal, as Carroll was a part of the Tarrant County Independent School District. In 1959, Carroll became an independent school district, and he was the first superintendent. For 30 years, he was one of the most respected superintendents in the state of Texas. When you talked about Carroll School District, you automatically thought of Jack D. Johnson. He never missed a sporting event, and it was said that if Carroll was playing marbles, Jack Johnson would probably be there. He started the football program from scratch, and I do mean from scratch. We are honored to have you with us this evening, and you will really enjoy what this man has to say. Jack Johnson.
Phil, I wish we didn't have to stop right now. You were doing so good there. That sounded real good. I'm not sure who you were talking about, though. It's a pleasure to be here again in the Carroll school system and to get you started right on this little talk that we're going to have. Think of this beautiful building that you're sitting in right now. What a magnificent structure. Now, I'm going to take you all the way back to where this all started. Sarah, thanks for the good words about our school district. When we became an independent school district, we didn't have any doubts. Sooner or later, we'd be the best there was. And sure enough, it turned out that we were the best school district in the Metroplex, and that includes a lot of school districts. All because of the people that I'm about to name as I go through here. There's going to be a lot of names come up, and I'm probably going to miss a lot of names that I shouldn't mention. But you can remind me tomorrow or whenever I'll see that they get their dues. But if you notice that I say I a lot, please forgive me, because when I say I, I'm talking about me, of course, and John Lowrey, Bob Ledbetter, a board member, several board members, the entire community. I may use I to get it started. So don't think a lot about it. This is the most appropriate time to have this program. I'm not sure, Phil, if you had an inkling that this was going to happen or not, but you picked exactly the right time. But because we started from scratch, as he said, and you'll see as I go through here and give you some of the things that happened. But in yesterday's Fort Worth Star Telegram, under miscellaneous, Carroll football tops in the nation. Carroll is ranked number 1 in the nation in the Student Sports Fab 50 preseason poll. The Dragons are ranked ahead of Concord, California de La Salle. The Dragons open the season August 28th against Midland Lee at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. Now just think about those things when I start to tell you about what was here way back when. This is something that is almost unbelievable that a school or school district could come from. It sounds like a long time for some of you. Some of you not even that old, 47 years. But to come from there to number 1 in the nation, that's really something. It just makes us so proud. And again, Phil, you did good to start this as you did. I'm going to read most of this. I wrote it down this afternoon, and if I don't, I'll forget something or I'll forget someone. But I'm going to talk a little bit from the time that I read it. Football came after a few things happened, and I'll start with my arrival here in South Lake. By the way, it was just 1 year old. South Lake was 1 year old when I got here. We actually started basketball first, but that's another story. We'll get into that next time we have a program like this. On August 21st, 1957, my wife Modine and my 2 small children arrived at South Lake, and Carroll School, Carroll Common School District, under the leadership of Dr. O.H. Stowe, County School Superintendent. I was hired as the principal. That night, it was an 8th grade school, 125 students, 6 teachers, and a 3-member board of trustees. Now here begins the people who got all this done. And Sarah, your remarks about what are those people thinking about? These people were smart enough, they knew the kind of people that were in South Lake and the kind of people who could make all these things happen the way they happened. That group consisted of Cleaver Eubanks, Clyde Cheatham, and Colin Sweet. Now, Cleaver Eubanks has a building named for him here in this district at this time. He spent 30-odd years running the maintenance department here. Clyde Cheatham has a son here today, Eddie, who was one tough football player. Clyde was a board president at one time here, and then Colin Sweet did not make it today, but he had children here also. Harold Knight took Cleaver Eubanks' place in the spring of that school year, and Cleaver Eubanks became the maintenance director. That night, as they hired me, they talked about a lot of things, but one of the things they wanted to know is if I thought I could start an athletic program. They were concerned that their children were not getting the opportunities to participate in any kind of athletics. And there was a reason for that, of course. Only through the 8th grade, and as they reached high school, they went to Grapevine or Keller or Northwest or some other school. But they didn't seem to fit as well there and did not participate maybe as they should. On that day, when I met the principal, he decided that I need to see the facility, so he takes me up on the little rock hill there, as you may remember, some of you. Bob still does, I know. And walked me around the building, the classroom building, which is now the building that you see transportation on. There's a sign out front that says transportation. Walked me around that building. Now that building had 6 classrooms and a book room on one end and a principal's office on the other end. There was a frame building for a cafetorium or cafeteria. And then there was a little building out back with flush toilets of all things. That was it. That was all that was there. So he walked me around the building, and you could tell, I could tell, the grass hadn't been mowed all summer. The reason I could tell because I had grass burrs all over my pants legs. I mean, it covered me up. And there was a reason that they didn't, it wasn't mowed. They didn't have a lawnmower. So, going through all of that and learning something about what little was there, I was happy nevertheless to be a part of that group of trustees there. And we talked about a lot of things that evening, as I said, but the most important thing was to start something. Now, in order to start a football program, we had to gain some facilities and equipment. They had, the equipment consisted of a softball and a bat in a corner in the principal's office at that time. That's a fact. At the end of the second year, we became an independent school district, as Sarah has told you, and began to hold over our 8th graders, who eventually made up our senior class, which graduated first senior class in 1965. Our high school students, as I said, have been going to Grapevine, Keller, etc., etc. The first football team was made up of 7th and 8th graders, which you saw up here. First football coach was H.G. Griffith. By the way, I coached H.G. Griffith myself, and he was one of the finest football players I was ever fortunate enough to coach. Wasn't altogether physical, it was mental also. He had a degree in chemistry. He stayed 1 year with us and decided there's more money to be made somewhere else. And as far as I know, he's independently wealthy now and retired. As we became an independent school district, we were required to elect a 7-member board, and the people that made up that board, if I get some of these wrong, guys like Wayne Frank can straighten me out, I guess, but hopefully I won't. Clyde Cheatham was the president of that board. Colin Sweet and Harold Knight moved on also, and Stan Burney, Curly McPherson, Buster Lee, and Wayne Frank were members of that board. And other significant board members along about this time, and I'm telling you this because these are the people that made all this happen. Frank Carroll served as the president. Dick Kirkland served as the president. And then there were L.R. Ragsdale and Hack Johnson were others that were a part of this group. Now back to football. First, we need a place to play. We had a little bit of land out in the southeast part of that little campus, just behind that classroom building. We had a little bit of land. And we didn't have any money. So I called the county commissioner for our area, Mr. Dick Lewis. Now believe me, Dick meant a lot to our football program. I told him what I had, what I needed. A good man with a grader could help me a great deal. Well, he sent me a man with a grader. He sent me 2 other men to assist that man on the grader. The man on the grader was Barney Brown. The 2 men who came with him were Buster Lee and Jesse Richardson. I know a lot of you know all these people, and they really made it happen. That's where it all came from. Bernie got out on that grader, and he worked that ground, no telling how many times. This was a sandy area up there, and it just kind of drifted like flour and everything else. But he worked, and he worked, and he'd grade one way, and he'd grade another, with these fellows helping him. He would, by noon, he was covered up in sand, dirt, dust, all this sort of stuff. But he didn't quit. He worked that until we came up with, now get this, we came up with 80 yards of playing surface. First football field was an 80-yard field here in South Lake Carroll. That's a fact, folks. And I'll tell you how we got the rest of it as we get on down here. And after he got through grading Mr. Cheatham, Clyde Cheatham, brought his tractor, plow in, he plowed that baby here, and everywhere. And we bought sprigs, and Clyde Cheatham and I sprigged that football field the first time. Can you imagine? We didn't have any sod to lay down, or hydromulch to blow on it. We sprigged it. Didn't do any good, but we did. And later on, we had to do something else. But let me tell you what happened. When we got that baby sprigged, Mr. Eubanks, being the maintenance man, found some hoses, got some hoses, tied onto a faucet. The only water system we had was a deep well at that time. We didn't have city water and that sort of thing. He tied on the faucets and he started sprinkling that sprigged Bermuda grass field. No telling how many hours he spent on that thing. In fact, we sprinkled that thing all day and all night. He and I would take turns at night, 4 hours each, out there working those sprinklers. Move one here, move one there, move one here. Reminds me a lot of Venner, when Venner used to work so hard coming shooter. So we worked that thing, and we didn't do any good, so finally, kind of gave up. And I had to call a fellow named Jim Eagle. John Lowrey will know him, and so other coaches, I'm sure. Jim was a center at North Texas back in late 40s, early 50s, is that right, Mr. Lowrey, something like that. Anyway, he'd gone into the sprinkler business, so I got him out there, and he was there to help me get this thing rolling, you know. And he said, I'm going to tell you something, Jack, we're the best in business. He paused for a minute, he said, we're the only one in the business. But believe me, he did help us. He helped us get that thing started. And he figured the least expensive way to help us do that, and of course that was what we were looking for, because we'd have had him money. Now, we went ahead and found a way to play on that 80-yard field and started playing. And you should have seen the fans after a game on that field. They were covered in dust and dirt and all that good stuff, and people didn't much want to come and play us, but they did. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say this right now, but Coach Ledbetter and Mr. Lowrey can tell you that that field became one of the best turfs in the Metroplex before it was over. We hated to have to give it up when we finally did, but it was a fine turf. And we have to give Mr. Eagle credit for helping us get all that done. But there's more to this story now. Of course, we finally got an 80-yard field we can play on. Now we had to have some lights. Now, this is a story I feel is worth repeating, but you may find it very boring. Here's what happened. I called E.A. Preacher Florence. That's Don Florence's father. Preacher was the head man for TPNL in the Grapevine area. He ran the place. I can guarantee you, but Preacher said win with electric in this area. He came out and we sat down and talked, and he finally said, well, Jack, maybe I can help you a little bit. Well, next time I heard from him, he had scrounged 8 poles. He found a way to get his crew out there, and they set those poles. All for no charge here, you understand. Now, this is the kind of thing that happened back in these days. You don't find it happening much these days. Anyway, he found the poles for us, and he set them in the ground for us, and then I called, well, I think he told me who I ought to call. I called Darrell Burgess. I was hoping Darrell would be here today. And I told him what I had, and that I was going to have to do some things. He said, just get your fixtures. That's all we need. So I called Preacher back. Well, Preacher got me some fixtures at the cost, you know. Whatever TP&L paid for them, that's what he paid for them for us. And that's what we had to pay for them. But anyway, called Darrell. Darrell came, brought his brothers, and a group called the Doty Boys, D-O-T-Y. You may know them, Sarah. You may know some of them. But they came out there. They climbed those poles. They put those fixtures up. Darrell tied that thing in. He put a breaker box. He did everything in the world he had to do to get us some lights. And he did. He got us some lights. The total, he didn't charge a penny. None of his people nor him charged anything. The total cost lighting that football field was $800. If that tells you anything about how we had to get by, that's one of the things that happened. But the fixtures, of course, as I said, were the big thing, and that's all we really had to pay for. And Darrell did all the climbing. They climbed those poles at that time. They didn't have these cherry pickers and things like that. They climbed those poles and worked right up to the top. Now, by this time we had to have some bleachers. And let me tell you how we got bleachers. I had this friend named Henry Ridings. Henry was a carpenter in the area. A lot of you know him. And I told him I needed some bleachers. How many bleachers are you talking about? Oh, we probably need to seat about 75 people to start out with here. He said, yeah, I can do that. He came up there and with 2x4s and 4x4s and 2x6s and 2x12s and all this sort of thing. He built a set of bleachers. Seated 75 people. Cost very little, I forgot what. I remember painting them gray. Oh, we were proud of them. They looked real good, of course. Now, we got to the place where we can play a little. We got a lighted 80-yard field and all this sort of stuff. It's time to find a practice field, you know. And this may be out of order a little bit as far as chronologically speaking, but this is what happened. We went out north of what is the old bus barn. We call it the bus barn back then. North of there, I called Dick again, and out comes Bernie with his grader again, and here we go. Cleaned that baby off, got us a place to practice. It running downhill, but that's all right. We got it. Now, not only was it running downhill, it had more rocks and pebbles and stuff like that on it than you'd ever see, and goat heads and everything imaginable. The kids just came in almost crying. They had to go through so much misery out there on that practice field. Now, I'll tell you a funny story about trying to clean that thing up. One morning, we were about getting ready for a PE class from one of the groups. J.R. Williams, one of the guys that helped us coach and taught for us, was the teacher for that PE class. And I called him in and I said, J.R., take your PE class and line them up on the west side of that field. Just walk them across there, have them pick up as many rocks as you can. And throw them across the fence over there on Joe Fector's place. Joe's already told me that's okay. Just take them over there and throw them over there. So they did. They walked and they walked and they ran again and they walked. After PE class was over, he came in my office. He says, Mr. Johnson, do you think we might be breaking a child labor law here? You can imagine what I said, and the next morning we did it again. Anyway, we never got to feel very good, did we, John? It never was worth much, but we used it anyway. But then we had, as I said, after we became an independent school district, we had to keep some of our kids, every year the 8th grade just remained as 9th graders next year. So we had to build a building down north of the old cafeteria to house these students as we kept them over. And in order to do that, we had to do a lot of excavation work. And when we did that excavation work, we had the contractor with his dump trucks take that dirt, put it on the east end of our football field, our 80-yard football field. Believe me, we had enough dirt to come out of that place down there that when we got through with it, and Joe Fector, another fine thing he did, one of the finest gentlemen we ever had as a neighbor, he gave us enough land to make that football field where we had 120 yards now. We were ready to go. We had a full football field now. So he made us feel pretty good, got us in a position to, at least people didn't come wondering about that 80-yard field. Now, I didn't tell you anything about student equipment, but when it came time to get equipment, this may have fallen back there somewhere else, but Frank Gaskell, who worked for CNS Sporting Goods over in Fort Worth, I'm sure you fellows know him. One of the finest guys I believe I ever met. He came out and he said, we could put together some equipment. We'll have enough equipment to take care of that group. And it'll be good enough, it'll be safe, and all these kinds of things, you know. And sure enough, he put together enough equipment for us to start that football playing. Here's some guys out here that wore some of that very first stuff. I'm looking at Eddie right now, and I know he wore it. And Wayne may have worn some of it, and Mike and others I've seen here today. But we got it done, didn't we, Eddie? We played it, and he did it the most economical way. As I told you in the beginning, we didn't have any money. We had to get this thing done, so we got it. That's the way we got it done. You probably noticed the picture of the first football team, and you probably knew a lot of those people who played. Again, some of them are here in the audience. That was 1959-60, when HG was here. Now, our bleachers became too small real soon. And I keep mentioning these people's names because if it hadn't been for them, we just couldn't have made it, like Frank Gaskell. This time it was Ed Cummings. Ed was a salesman for Southern Bleacher out of Graham. He'd been calling on me, and I told him what we needed, so he sat down. He put together a system that we could buy and afford, and so he put us in business for bleachers. Actually, we finally wound up with a pretty good football field for that time, that day and time. Not today, but that day and time. It was a good football field, and those bleachers we were quite proud of. All the big paint, all the big steel, and all that sort of thing. we could hardly wait to show them off for the first football game. Now, other than H.G. Griffin as our first coach, we also had Gene Witzel, who followed H.G. We had George Crawford. We had Max Boydston. Tell you a little story about Max. Max was a two-time All-American at Oklahoma University. He was the first draft pick out of his senior class when he graduated from Oklahoma University. And he told me one time, well, I'm sure all of you read these stories about how much these players get for signing and all that sort of thing in the millions and millions and millions. Max told me that he got the highest anybody got. He was number one. He got $12,500 for signing. That's how things were back then. Today, he would probably get $15 million for signing, something like that. But anyway, another funny part of that, Max being here, everybody wondered how in the world did they hire Max Boydston to coach when they're just starting football. Well, down at the grocery store, Benny Burris's grocery store, Max was coming through there each morning to go over to his place. He owned a place here on 114. Go over there and check on where he had over there, cattle, horses. He was a horseman. And Benny was talking to him. So when we lost George Crawford in the middle of the year, Benny was talking to me, which we talked about every day. He said, "Won't you hire Max?" I laughed at him. Of course, we had no way we could hire Max. Max had just retired from Oakland. He played 4 years, I believe it was, of pro ball, and he just retired from Oakland. He said, "Yeah, you can hire him." Well, okay, you bring him up here. I hadn't even met him, so he brought him to my office. Sure enough, we hired Max Boydston, and he coached for us. And of course, as you'll see as we go on down, he came back again. A.O. Heinzman followed Max. John Lowrey followed A.O. And Max came back for another stint. Max Boydston came back. And then Jim McGuire followed Max Boydston. Bill Branham followed McGuire. And Coach Ledbetter followed Branham. And then, of course, Mr. Rapp and now Coach Todd, who's also with us today, will be talking to you to the present time. Very proud of all these people, and they really have done great things. And as you can see, coming from where I started you there to number one in the nation today, that's a heck of a job, isn't it? Boy. Let me finish up. I haven't bragged enough. I want to brag a little more. Sarah knows I'm good at that. In 1979, we passed a bond issue, and that bond issue included a new stadium, a field house, and a baseball field. And we had admired the football field and stadium at Coppell for so many years. We thought if we could get something like that, it'd be great. We built the stadium. We built the track. Outdid them all. We had the best stadium in the area. I'll guarantee it. And these people can tell you that's the way it was. Now, that stadium, as I said, was done from bond money that we had from that bond issue. Since that time, of course, many great stadiums have been built, including our own Dragon Stadium, which overshadows everything that I know of. It's beautiful. Well done. Guys, did a great job. Not only did we have the best stadium at that time, we had the best coach. We got in that stadium, Mr. Ledbetter was our coach, and as you know, set all kinds of records while he was our coach. Let me tell you how we hired Mr. Ledbetter. Mr. Lowrey was a high school principal at that time, and we had gone through interviews and all these sorts of things while we were hiring coaches before, and we decided this time we didn't want to go through all that. We just wanted a good coach. The board told me, hire us a good football coach. So John and I sat down and We said, let's talk about whoever we want to, but let's pick what we both believe to be the best coach in Texas and hire him. The board didn't say he didn't have the money, didn't cut me back on money at that time. Said, hire us a good coach. So we both decided that Bob Ledbetter was that coach, and we went after him. Bob at that time was a baseball coach at Mineral Wells, and elementary principal or assistant principal, I'm not sure which. Didn't matter at that time. We wanted him for football. So we brought him to the office and we hired him on the spot. History tells the rest of it, as you know. Sure made Mr. Lowrey and I look good. We appreciate that. This is probably the most, I know it is, most successful program I've ever seen or heard of. And I've been here a long time. It's because of all these names that I gave you while I've been talking here, board members, that sort of thing, people who helped us, the coaches. Mr. Lowrey, even though he coached, he's also one of the top administrators in the whole country. And a program that had been built and done what this program done, it's almost unbelievable. But that wasn't the only thing that happened. As you know, a football program, not everyone will agree with me on this statement, but a football program, a good football program is probably the most important and most valuable thing any high school can have. Because a good football program creates pride. Pride causes students to want to do well. Expectations rise, and the first thing you know, we're on top. And that's exactly what happened. The football program that these gentlemen put together partially helped us become recognized in 1985-86 as one of the top 8 school districts in the state of Texas academically. Both football and academics. They go hand in hand. It's all because of people that I've just read here, along with Coach Todd, who is on his hands now and is doing an excellent job and continues to show strength and improve as we go along. Coach Todd, you're doing a great job. As you can see, I'm pretty proud of everything Carroll is. Give a lot of credit to all these coaches, to these people that I mentioned as I talked here. But I'm going to mention one other board of trustees, all 7 of them, that probably had greatest impact on the school district, in my opinion, that there could possibly be as a group. That group consisted of Bob Rockenbaugh, president, Beverly Bradley, vice president, John Tate, secretary, Billy Hodges, Ed Nowak, Bob Powell, and Freddie Kate. They were in position as trustees, board members, during the time all these good things were taking place. And believe you me, each and every one of them saw nothing but what was good for that child. It wasn't their child, it was every child in school. That, more or less, was their theme song. And I'm going to close, and I would like to recognize my football players. I'm pretty proud of my football players. And I think my son Tommy is here today. Tommy played football, basketball, ran track. In fact, he held the high jump record in the school for several years. So I'm very proud of Tommy and his participation in this program, and he'll never forget the things he learned from the coaches that he had. Coach Lowrey was one of them here. Another one is my grandson, Jeff Carroll. Coach Ledbetter got to coach him. Jeff was on the state championship football team in 92. He was on the state championship basketball team in 93. He was a member of the mile relay team that went to state in 93. So Jeff had a very memorable senior year because of the people that I just talked about. And then my son-in-law, I'm going to get through here if y'all just bear with me. My son-in-law, Larry Croy, played with a lot of these guys out here now. In fact, a picture of he and Mike Frank were on a little flyer that went out. But he also played football, basketball, ran track. He held the long jump, we called it the broad jump then, broad jump record for many years here at school. But one other thing he's most proud of is he was the first football player to ever score 5 touchdowns in one game. That made us all very proud, of course. Now, thank you for bearing with me here as I went through some of these things. No one is prouder than I am of being a Dragon and having been a part of all this. And the people that I mentioned to you and many, many others put it all together and saw that it got done. And Sarah set this thing up for me when she started. There's not a better school. There's not a better athletic program. There's not a better anything anywhere. Thank y'all.
Now you know why we named that school that. Our next speaker came from Sanger, Texas, in the fall of 1967 as head basketball coach and assistant football coach and teacher. He was head football coach for 1 year and then became principal of Carroll Middle School for 3 years. He became principal of Carroll High School in 1979 and superintendent in 1987. He still attends all games as well as any other sporting event. Let me welcome John Lowrey, our next speaker.
I don't know if I can talk here without being able to use my hands, without somebody don't have to turn these notes too much. Those were the good old days Mr. Johnson talked about, and some would argue that today are the good days, but I challenge that. I enjoyed those days with Mr. Johnson. I missed out on a lot of that at the beginning, but I was here when we built that practice field on the east end of the campus at the current intermediate school, and that field had more low places in it than it did high places. Football fields are supposed to be crowned, most of you know. And that was the most interesting thing about that field. It was flat. When it rained, there's a mud hole here and a mud hole there, and we had to move around to the various spots. And we moved all over that campus when it rained. We'd be behind the gym, we'd be over on the bus parking lot, we'd be in the ruts of the bus barn where the buses went to the barn. But we didn't know any better because ours was as good as anybody else's, so we thought it was great. And it was an improvement over where we had been, for sure, as Mr. Johnson had outlined to you, for you. And I feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to be a part of many of these activities that Mr. Johnson talked about. I did come here in that fall of 1967. Coaching in those days was a little different than what I observe today. Probably not as good, but it was an interesting thing. There were 2 coaches when I came here, myself and the head coach. And I always considered myself a basketball coach that helped the football coach. And Max Boydson, or A.O. Heinzman, was the football coach at that time. And he and Mr. Durham and I that was the coaching staff. And Mr. Durham was also the elementary principal. And somehow, there always had to be a problem of some kind come up about the time football practice started. Mr. Durham was a basketball coach as well, and rightfully so, he had to take care of things, and being the football coach that day was not a priority. Now, Mr. Heinzman, football coach, we had the privilege, I guess you'd call it, of being, I don't know if I was the backfield coach or the line coach. So when we started practices, Coach Heinzman would say, okay, all you backs go down with Coach Lowrey, linemen stay here. The next practice, we switched roles. I became line coach, and he became the back coach. And he'd call out those, and then he'd say, and you AOs, you go down with Coach Carroll. And those of you that might not wonder what AO is, that's all others. So we coached, worked together, and had a lot of fun. And today, that's unheard of, but at that time, it was a lot of fun. And we didn't know any better because everybody else was doing the same thing. And we were successful under that system as well. I was going to mention a few things Mr. Johnson touched on, mostly just getting to 1967 or so. I thought I would back up and talk a little bit about the history of Carroll football as it relates to the UIL. Mr. Johnson did mention that first senior class was in 1965. And I believe in the fall of 64, Wayne Moffitt, I know we talked about this a while ago, my chronological numbers may not be exactly right, but we won a district championship for the first time in 1965. That was our second graduating class, I believe, first graduating class. And we were Class B at that time. And we were Class B, we joined the UIL, I believe, Mr. Johnson, in 64 or 62. 62 or 64, we joined the UIL. We were Class B. We stayed there until 1965. We were district champions and had a 10-2 record that year. In 1966, we moved up to Class A. And those of you that follow sports in Texas know that that's based on enrollment in high school. We moved up to Class A in 1966 and stayed there until 1979, when we again won the state district championship, which was the first time since that 65 group. And we were 9-1 and lost to Wolf City. During that period of time, I think a lot of things happened that added to what Mr. Johnson talked about. I think that was a time whenever establishment of some of these traditions that are still going today began. Those activities and those teams and those players in those days, I think had a lot to do with putting Carroll where it is today, academically as well as athletically. And that was important. My numbers that I added up showed we were like 82 wins and 56 losses in those 14 years prior to Mr. Ledbetter coming. And that was the time that we were growing. When I came here in 1967, we had 180 students in high school. In 1980, throughout the state, they eliminated Class B and everybody moved up. We moved up into 2A in 1980 through 1985, and Coach Ledbetter, of course, came in 1979. So that tells you a little bit about what's happened. And we had 2 district champions in that period of time, but we also had 5 teams that were district runner-ups. And as you know now, football in Texas, there's 3 teams go to the playoffs every year. Prior to 1990, only 1 team went to the district playoffs. So we had 5 teams, 7 teams out of half of our teams in that period of time were in the playoffs, or would have been under today's schedule. I think our championship attitude maybe in Carroll Independent School District started during that time. We won a girls' state championship in basketball in 1965, had a team that played in the state tournament in 1972, and I noticed, I think Peggy O'Brien was here. She was on both of those teams, I believe. And that, I think, was our first district state championship in any sport. And this, in my opinion, got us started. The leader of that 75 team was Kathy Harston, who is currently the top assistant women's coach at the University of Texas. So those were some, again, took a lot of individuals, but as then as now, the team concept was very strong and continues to be that way. The coaches, I talked about those. 1968, the second year I was here, Ronnie Cullen was hired to teach. And in those days, I'm not even sure about this, but I think that Mr. Cullen was hired as a history teacher, and in those days, if you were a male in a small school district, whether you knew anything about any sport or not, you became a coach or something. They could find something for you to do. And Mr. Cullen, I don't believe, was hired as a coach, but it didn't take but about a week for him to be the #1 bus driver and assistant football coach. We had 2 bus routes at that time, by the way, and it wasn't uncommon for school to be out and the football team to be working out, and somebody would come running down off the hill and say, "We need a bus driver, we need a bus driver." And so Mr. Cullen or I had to go run a bus route, and we'd come back and finish football practice. And those were the good old days, I said, as we started. But that was, we just knew what we had to do and did it, and I guess today that wouldn't be acceptable today in any standard, would it? In 1970, I had a good year. I was JV football coach, head basketball coach, JV basketball coach, junior high boys and girls basketball coach, and head track coach. And in my spare time, I drove that bus. I remember one week that year that I coached myself 11 basketball games. Part of them in Millsap, part of them in Carroll, part of them in Boyd. And I remember the Saturday was district tournament in junior high basketball, and our boys and girls were both in the tournament at Millsap. The boys played like at 10 o'clock in the morning, but the girls were in another bracket and played at 12 o'clock. So I drove the bus and the team to Millsap. We played that game, and we won that game, which put us in the finals for later on that day. I brought that team home, picked up the other team, the boys. We went back to Millsap and played there. They won, so we both had teams, so we had to stay there at about 11 o'clock for all the games that night because we were playing for the championship. But again, we didn't know any better, and we had fun, and we were in the business to take care of and help kids, and it was a lot of fun regardless of, I've said many times, I was in education for 30 years, and I've said many times, people say, "How's your wife put up with you after all those years?" And I say, "Well, we never had any trouble. We never saw one another for 30 years." So we didn't have any opportunities to get fights or have any trouble because I was never home. But some of you have jobs like that today, but it was interesting and a lot of fun. And during that same time frame, Mr. Whittingham and Mr. Cook were hired to assist in all sports. They got a little of that, but I used to kid them a little bit. They thought 2 or 3 sports were maybe too much for them. And, I said, well, we could go to Millsap 3 times in one Saturday and everything would be all right. But it was a lot of fun. Some observations that I've had about coaching football in those early days. There were no scouts. We didn't scout anybody. We read the 4 Star Telegram, find out if Farmersville won or not. That's about the only information we had. We didn't have enough coaches. There were only 2 of us. And so we both had to stay at home because one of us had to be the trainer. Somebody had to stay home and tape ankles and take care of things. We had all the modern techniques in those days. I had one player one year, Michael's Limpickles. A few of you might remember Mike. Mike always, any excitement in a football game, he would get hyperventilated. So being knowledgeable trainers that we were, we always carried a brown paper bag in our first aid kit. And probably some player sat Mike down on the bench and let him breathe into that brown paper bag for a little while, and he was ready to go after that. You might have to do that a couple of times during the game. You had to do what you had to do to take care of business. Most of the fields that we played on were not lighted well enough to produce good films. And it wasn't unusual. I guess about 1969 or 70, the Booster Club bought a second-hand handheld, I guess that was what, 35 millimeter, what was that? 16 millimeter camera. And one of the Booster Club members and Mr. Carroll became the official filmers. It wasn't unusual at all. Well, each Friday night after the football game, one of the coaches would take the film to WDAP over off of Interstate 30 in Fort Worth and wait there until midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, however long it took them to process it. And they'd stay there for that and have it the next morning. It wasn't unusual for us to show up on a Saturday morning for our meeting with the kids and discover that all those films that night before were blank. Something had happened to the camera and it didn't work, and so we still didn't have anything. But we got through it. I mentioned those practice areas that at the current intermediate school. That was, again, something to behold. You couldn't tell where we were going to be practicing. The watering system, I was involved or able to participate in that some, dragging those garden hoses. That's what Mr. Johnson talked about. Water sprinklers and garden hoses. We drug them all over that campus, it seemed like, to take care of that. Then when we moved to the high school, to what's now called Old Dragon Stadium, we used the Dragon Stadium as our practice field for about 6 years. We didn't play our games there. We continued to play our games up on that original field because it had such good turf and it was better. Well, we probably couldn't afford to finish out that stadium at that time either. But we had one of the organizers of this program now, of course, is the Booster Club. And I think that's one thing Carroll has, I think, today, is an active Booster Club and has had ever since I've been here. And when you need something done athletically, those people, no matter who they are, they get it done. We built the cinder track. We built a cinder track at that stadium solely by labor by the Booster Club. And Homer Fiker's here tonight. He was one of the leaders of that operation. Probably remember digging out all those broad, long jump pits. I said broad jump too. Shows you how old I am, I guess, doesn't it? But Homer Fiker, Wayne Johnson, two I remember for sure, Neil Delka, all the cinders. We brought the cinders in from Strong, Texas, built a track, and we were just as proud as if it was the greatest all-weather track anywhere around. Our first track meets, we had our shop teacher to fix an old white van up with 2 speakers on top of it. That was our press box. And speaking of the press box there, eventually Mr. Willingham and Mr. Whitefield and a couple of students built that press box as it exists today. So it was a team effort. Everything we've done, everything that we've done as players, coaches, etc. And that's a part of something that I'm very proud of is see those t-shirts those kids wear today with the team being more important than me. That has lasted a long time. Another thing that makes me proud, I don't know who started this, but the terminology of pride and tradition goes a long ways. And I think, I like to think that I had something to do, we old timers had something to do with that reaching the point that it is today. But that's something that I would hope that's going to continue forever in this district. Another thing that amazes me is the number of dragon decals that I see on people's rear windows. I've never seen, anybody can have a Mustang or a Tiger or a Yellow Jacket, but you don't find an identifiable logo like the Carroll Dragons have. And you may see them, I believe Ed LeVay mentioned one time he was in West Virginia or Virginia at a location and came out and there was a car that had a Dragon logo sticker on the back window. So I would challenge some of these players that are here today, and I know Coach Dodge is doing everything he can to keep that going, but pride and tradition is what got us where we are today, and it's what will get us that much farther. And this is not very important, I guess, to anybody but me, but I think I've missed 7 football games in the last 37 years. So enjoyed them all. Whether we win or lose, I'm still in favor of the Dragons. So, with Mr. Ledbetter. Phil Barton.
Our next speaker came to Carroll as head football coach in 1979. Over the next 17 years, Carroll posted a record of 181 wins, 31 losses, and 3 ties. During a 7-year period from 1987 to 1993, the Dragons' record was an amazing 102 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie. Included in the remarkable record is 3 state championships, 1988, 1992, and 1993, 6 state semifinalists, 7 straight district championships, 7 straight perfect 10-0 regular season wins, and an incredible 72-game regular season consecutive win streak that is still a state record. One football publication declared the 1992 Carroll football team as the greatest of all time in Texas high school football history, regardless of classification. He retired as head football coach in 1996 to become just the athletic director until his retirement. Let us welcome Bob Ledbetter.
This is really nice, and I really appreciate everything that's been done. It was really great to listen to Jack and John and hear all those stories and all of that. And Sue, I must say that you look a lot better now than you did wherever you are. Sue, you already left and gone home. Good. I'm going to not be real long. There are some things that I would like to just kind of go through and talk about for a second, but let me just clarify, a few things and make sure. Well, Mr. Johnson, when I was the head coach and athletic director, when I finally got to be a head coach, I was at Vernon as a defensive coordinator, and I wanted to be a head coach, and I applied at 2 schools. I applied at Wiley, Texas, and I applied at Frisco, Texas. And I ended up getting the Frisco job. And I found out later why, because I was the only one that really applied, because they only had 1 starter coming back that next year, and so on like that. I'd never heard of South Lake. I didn't know anything about South Lake, but I was at Frisco, Texas. After my first year, we went in the district with South Lake. And we came to South Lake to play with the Frisco, we were the Frisco Coon. They're now the Frisco Raccoon. When we came to South Lake, and at the stadium Mr. Johnson was talking about, at that time then, it was a great field, great turf, and I'm hearing all of this, that was wonderful. But we came out on the field for pregame warm-up, and there were 4 coon dogs down in our end zone that were tied on chains. And I had never seen them, and I was wondering what was going on. And so I went over to Coach Branham, who was the head coach, Bill Branham. I said, Bill, you got to do this. He said, Coach, Bob, I'm not doing anything about this. You need to talk to that man down there in those overalls. And that man named Mr. Shooper. Is that not right? That was my first experience with South Lake. And we couldn't even run through pregame warm-up because my receivers, they run a route. Kid would come back to huddle and say, Coach, I've never seen dogs on a football field. I came to South Lake, Texas. But we were fortunate enough to win the football game. And later on, after all that and so on, I got a call from Mr. Johnson. Several years and so on like that. And we'd been in the district together. And I'd come to really respect Carroll. it wasn't necessarily maybe because of winning and things like that, but because of the administration and the kids and the community and the parents. Because everywhere I went at Frisco, if we went to Lake Dallas or Little Elm or wherever it might be a 7th grade track meet, these two gentlemen were there. And I always wondered, what is the deal? The superintendent, the principal, and all that. And I was at Frisco. If it was a baseball game, they were there. Whatever it was. And this intrigued me. So Mr. Johnson called me when his head football job, athletic director job, so came available. And, he said, Coach Ledbetter, we'd like you to come to South Lake. We'd like to visit with you about the head football job, athletic director position at South Lake. And I said, Mr. Johnson, I've applied for several jobs and so like that, but I said, what is your procedure going to be? I mean, how many are you going to take to the board? How many are you going to interview? And there was kind of a lull. And Mr. Johnson said, Coach, you're talking to the board right now. And if you want this job, you need to come over here and visit with us. And at that time, and the more I realized that this school district was being run by the administration, the teachers, and that these two gentlemen, this was their life. Truly. And this school district, even then, you could see, had an opportunity because of these guys. It wasn't because of me, things like that. The foundation is what it's all about. And this is why we're where we are today. True. There's a lot of great things that happened. And there's been a lot of people come along and, I can talk forever. I can stand up here and talk about games. We can talk about kids. We've had a lot of great kids. But we haven't, the great thing about Carroll is, we haven't had what you might say the great athletes, but we've had great kids. And we've been very successful in a lot of those areas. When I went to Frisco, Texas, and took my first head coaching job, I learned a very valuable lesson. Real quickly, I thought I was the greatest coach there ever was. And I had a young man, I had one starter back in Frisco. I had one starter named Sammy Turner. Sammy Turner was special ed. He drove a garbage truck. This was back before we had modification, before we had all that. Sammy couldn't read, and so on. Sammy took some shop class. He was the only starter coming back in Frisco. I was coaching Sammy. I'd been all this and all that. I was coaching the linebackers, and I'm telling Sammy, A gap, B gap, onside guard. The lineman pulls, you step onside. Center blocks here, you step backside. Sammy was the only starter returning. Sammy had to make a tackle in 2 days and 2 of them. His head was spinning so on. I was getting on Sammy Turner. Anyway, we played our first game against Allen. Sammy Turner didn't make a tackle. Sammy Turner was playing middle linebacker, and I was coaching linebacker. I was a heck of a linebacker coach. I can tell you, I thought. But on Saturday morning, when we went in the film room, and I started running that film, and I started ripping Sammy Turner about Sammy. You've got to do this, you've got to do that. About onside, blah, 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 in football terminology. Anyway, after everybody left, Sammy came in the office. He said, Coach, can I visit with you? I said, yes, Sammy. Sit down. And he said, Coach, you're a great football coach. And if you'll just let me play football, go tackle a man with the ball, I can play football. I said, Sammy, you can't play this game. I said, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and so on. Then that night, I thought all about that over the weekend. Monday morning, I went out there to practice. practicing and all that, and I decided I'd kind of leave Sammy alone. And, you know, I didn't coach him that much. I left him alone. And Sammy Turner was voted that year the best defensive player in the state of Texas in our classification. Heck of a job coaching. I made one. Sammy Turner was the best football player I've ever coached. Couldn't go to college. Those recruiters would come by there, you know, they'd look, Sammy couldn't get in. But when Sue and I left Frisco and all of that, I got Sammy a job with a home builder there in Frisco. And he was doing grunt work, picking up the trash. I'm going to tell you what football means to me, other than wins and things like that. But Sammy Turner picked up, you know, for a builder. But he had taken shop class. Sammy, as we were playing, Sammy used to come to some of our playoff games. When I got here at Carroll, and 8, 9, 10 years later down the road. Let me go back and tell you one thing. Sammy made me a gun cabinet. And he brought it over in his old pickup truck when Sue and I were leaving. And he gave me a gun cabinet. And so, I still got that gun cabinet. Out of all the furniture she's bought over the years, she's got all the garage sales we've had. You know, we'll never get rid of that gun cabinet. But the bottom line in this whole story and what I'm leading to is that Sammy Turner kept on and kept on. He never quit. And Sammy Turner built the cabinets in Jerry Jones's house. Sammy Turner's the biggest cabinet builder in North Dallas. He lives at Stonebriar Country Club today, or Stonebridge, one of those over there. Very, very successful. In 91, whatever year it was, I was walking up the ramp at Pennington Field after we'd broken some kind of record. I don't even know Phil, but as I was coming up the ramp, and Sammy Turner was standing outside the gate, and he had been at the ball game, but he was outside the gate, and I told Leon and the guy, I said, let that gentleman in. Sammy came in, and he had his little boy with him, and he asked me if I'd sign that program, the program. And I said, no. He said, Coach, this is my little boy, and so would you sign? I said, no, Sammy. I said, what you need to do is you need to sign that program for me, because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you. And that's the same thing. And his son was standing there, and I took him in the dressing room, and he talked to our kids, and I told our players about him, and all that. But the reason for that is that what eventually taught me was that kids can achieve extraordinary goals if they believe in themselves and if they care about each other. And all those things like that. It doesn't take great athletes. Teams that win state championships aren't those teams that have the best athletes. Many times those schools that have great athletes never win a state championship. And I think, of course, what I'm so proud of is what Coach Dodge has continued with in protecting the tradition and all those things like that, and Coach Dodge's philosophy and all of that. But we had a young man here in Carroll by the name of Scott Huber, and we were playing Gladewater, which I think was on one of these clips. Gladewater had a great football team, Coach Jack Murphy. And we were playing at Mesquite. Scott Huber was a center, weighed 180 pounds. Gladewater had a nose guard named Stoney Clark. Stoney Clark weighed 320 pounds, was the #1 defensive lineman in the state, had already committed to the University of Texas. Scott Huber was never going to play college football. He was playing center. Stoney Clark was playing nose guard. And we were fixing to play Gladewater. And it's Sunday in there in the coaches' meeting, I kept telling Coach Rushing that I can't play with Scott. We're going to have to, and Coach Rushing kept saying, Coach, you know, Scott can do it. I said, Al, he can't play with him. He cannot block, or we can't run the midline, we can't run the trap. What are we going to do? We're going to run outside all night? Huh. And Al Rushing kept saying, Coach, he can play. I said, Al, I got to move somebody in there. Anyway, as the week went on and we prepared Scott, in fact, when they were walking out to practice, and I just told Hugo, I said, Hugo, I want you to stand here and block this Coke machine because we can't simulate, Stoney out on the field. And as I'm walking by, Hugo halfway believing this is, and I'm beginning to really get worried. And then I finally realized that, who knows? So we get into the ball game, and on our first series, they kick off to us, and it's 1st and 10. It's 2nd and 10, and it's 3rd and 10 or whatever. And we run the midline, we run the trap, and Stoney made 2 tackles, and so on. So we're coming off the field, punt team's going on the field. I talked to Scott all week about Stoney and what you had to, this and that, trying to really get him motivated. And Scott, as he's coming to the sideline, I go to him, and as I get to him, I said, Scott, and his eyes are real big. And I mean, they're so big that I'm beginning to wonder, they're kind of glassy looking. And he looks at me, and I said, Scott, he said, Coach, he's got the biggest head I've ever seen. True story. And I said, Scott, and then he said, Coach, when he sticks his tongue out and rolls his tongue out, big head. I said, Scott, I don't want a physical description of him. I just want to know if we're going to be able to block it. Anyway, it goes on, and we go on back out in the 2nd series where we get the ball back, and, we're getting, and so about our 3rd series, we still hadn't accomplished, and we're punting the football. I think it's 3 and after about those first 3 series. And I'm beginning to get a little bit concerned from that standpoint. And then as the game goes on, and as things begin to continue, Scott begins to win the battle. And Scott begins, and we begin to start making things happen. And there, as we finish and so on, we win the battle from that standpoint. We win the football game. And as I walk out on the field that night, and I'm talking to Jack Murphy in the middle of that field, and Todd, I know you can relate to this, but one of the greatest things, when you look down the field and the shadows on the field, and Stoney's got his arm around Scott, and they're walking down the field, they got on black uniform, we got on a green or whatever, and they're just talking. And I'm talking to Jack Murphy. But I'd give anything to have that picture, because that's what this game is all about. And when I walked in the dressing room and looked around, Scott Huger was sitting in his locker. I'll never forget it. His nose was bleeding, his lip was cut, his eye was swollen. He'd been through a complete battle. And as I walked over to his locker, he got up, I hugged him, and he said, Coach, thanks for believing. Thanks for believing it. And I said, Scott, Coach Ledbetter didn't believe it. I'm going to be honest with you, but that doesn't matter. But you believe in yourself. And that's what's important. And I said, you got one more football game to play, and that's the state championship game. And I said, Stoney don't go and play college ball and all that. But what you accomplished out there tonight, you can be anything that you want to be. You can do anything you want to do, because you'll never face the obstacles that you did tonight. And you came out on top. Adversity history with Scott Hewitt. Scott went on, was very successful, graduated from A&M, so on, and accomplished a great deal. The 88 football team, I was looking at that up there. I don't know if most of you are here, and I'm just going to touch on a few things here because David Blanchard in 88. We had so many great kids. If I start mentioning names, I mean, you know how that is. David Blanchard's dad came to me and said he wanted David to be an I-back. I said, an I-back? He said, yes, he could be an I-back. Like for Southern Cal or for whoever it might be. You know, they run an I and he's a tailback. He needs to be a tailback. We were a wishbone team, by the way. They used to have Bush Club. Used to have Dad ask me one time, say, when are we going to throw the ball? Why don't we throw the football? I said, if you'll get there between 7:05 and 7:20 in pregame warm-up, we're going to throw the football. And I said, last week we were 11 out of 21 in pregame. I never had that question again after that. But anyway, David's dad wanted him to be the I-back. And so I'll never forget, Coach Lively, when I sat down, I said, and our offensive backs were numbered 2-back, 3-back, 4-back. Pretty difficult. And David was a fullback. He wanted to be the I-back. So I called him in, I sat him down, I said, David, guess what? We're fixing to design an offense around here. This will be the greatest thing. This was in 87 in the spring. I said, you're going to be the I-back. Really? I said, yeah, you're going to be the I-back. And you're still going to line up right here. You're still going to do this and that. But this is going to be called the I-back. That's what we do. To this day, I swear, to this day, David Blanchard thinks he was the I-back at Carroll High School, and he rushed for 2,000 yards as a fullback and so on. But that was one way of taking care, of a situation that psychologically, worked out. The 92 Vernon game, let me touch on that for just a second because Coach Britton and I, have talked about this many times. Those of you that were there, those of you who weren't, it was one of those situations at Pennington Field that they closed the stadium. You've all heard that. They had people in the end zone. I saw some clips here. It was a very volatile situation. Vernon was a football team that was they taunted a lot. They did a lot of things that we didn't allow. I was a little bit concerned from that standpoint. But as a ball game, we came out of the dressing room that night. We couldn't get to the field because there were people sitting all up around and all that. They turned 4,000 away or something like that. So the fire marshal said we couldn't get down the ramp. Finally, we got the police escorts to get us on the field. But the rest of it's history. The ball game was 39-35 and so on like that. As I walked across the field that night, I almost felt sorry for Coach Britton because it was such a great high school football game. And as I walked over to Leo, and as I'm standing there talking to Leo, and I'm saying, Leo, we just witnessed one heck of a high school football game. And in that, we knew it was a state championship game almost because the year before we'd lost 11-6 at Vernon, Texas, in a situation. And they went on and won it, and we knew this game and so on. But it was a great high school football game. And the thing I remember the most, that when that game started, there was not any mouthing, there was not any taunting, there was some hitting, there was a lot of that. It was a tough, physical football game, but it was two teams, two schools with kids that respected each other. And even though coming in and looking at films of them, we saw so many things that we did not like. And that did not come out that night in that football game at all. In 19, we've got a few of our players here that went through this era, but we had a young man, I think, which symbolizes a lot of our Carroll athletes, like Scott Hubner and so on. But real quick, I want to tell you real quick about a young man named Jeff McCutcheon. Jeff was a kid that played from his first grade at Carroll, went all the way through, played every year and so on, and never was a starter. He never played, until his senior year. And we had to put him on varsity. We couldn't go ahead and redshirt him. UIO rule, you know. Great kid. Hard-working kid. Never missed a practice. Was the first one on the field every day. Last one off. Worst football player ever played at Carroll. Great kid. Wanted to play. Senior year, scout teams, if we needed a tackle, he was in there. If we needed a running back, he was in there. We couldn't keep him out of there. The coaches were trying to get him out because he was going to get hurt. We had a pretty good football team. But every time he was out there, he broke his ribs. I told Dr. Hanson, don't take the cast off till he's 25. I don't care what happens. Jeff took the cast off himself. Went down and made it to where he could play with a playing cast. We had a rule at Carroll at that time that if you were a senior, you had to have a starting position. And you were going to be on varsity. Special team, offense, defense, or whatever. Coach Drake was our special teams coordinator. He said, Coach, what are you going to do with McCutcheon? I said, he's going to play. He said, well, Coach, he can't. I said, he's going to play. Anyway, after the first ball game, he called me in. He said, Coach, what's the kickoff team? Going down the field, bam, somebody hits him. I mean, it's feet in the air and everything else. We got to move him. So we go through that year on special teams. Get through it. We're sitting in there before the athletic banquet, getting ready for our athletic banquet. We've got Dane Johnson. We said we got Dane, we got Will, we got a great player, we got all that. Coaches, we're fixing to name the C Award winner. I walk into coach's office, they got Dane, they got Will, they got whoever up on the board. And I said, where is Jeff McCutcheon on the board? And the coach, you could have heard a pen drop. And so on and so on, you can imagine the discussion. But to make it very simple, I had 51% of the vote. And at that point in time, my point is this, is that Jeff McCutcheon won the C Award that year at Carroll High School. And he got a standing ovation. And I'm thinking, and Jeff got up and talked because he had never won anything in his life. He had never been here. But when spring came, I always had my seniors come in and we'd talk about what they're going to do. Where you want to go to school, where you want to play. You know, you got all these players coming in, I want to walk on here, and I want to walk on there, and I'm not even thinking. One day Jeff walks in my office. I said, McCutcheon, what do you want? He said, Coach, I want to walk on at Tech. I said, walk on what at Tech? What do you want to walk on and do? He said, Coach, I want to play football at Tech. I said, Jeff, let's sit down. Let's have the father-son talk, whatever you want to do. And I said, Jeff, no. I think Ricky may remember something. But the great thing about it was he went to Tech and he walked on. And about, I don't know how long, anyway, I get a call from Dick Winter, the offensive coordinator at Tech. He says, Ledbetter, who is this crazy sucker from Carroll? We got out here that is lining up and getting in front of these people. He's going to get hurt. But he won't shy away from anybody. And then later on, then Spike died. And so on. And this goes on. And he gets beat and beat. But Jeff Letters at Texas Tech his senior year. Makes the special teams, suits up at home ball games, and so on. And Jeff is in law enforcement today and doing very, very well. The great thing that has been established here at South Lake through Todd Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Lowrey, is that I firmly believe that when our kids graduate and they're handed that diploma, they know they can be successful because they've been successful. And I don't care what programs you go to in any school district, if those schools are not successful, there is doubt when those kids walk across that stage and they're handed that diploma. Our kids walk across, they know they can be successful. And that's one of the great things about it. I made two great decisions. I've been at Carroll High School. Two great decisions. By the way, Mr. Johnson, when I came to Carroll, he was talking about money. Let me tell you a quick thing. I said, Mr. Johnson, I got to have a limit. He said, Coach, I got a deal for you. I said, okay. He said, you're going to drive the bus. You're going to drive the bus in the morning. And he said, we can pay you a little extra money. Well, I got $6. Coach, you just run that elementary. I drove that bus for 24 years. That bus ride. That's a true, and I just thought of that. I still owe you for that. But I made two great decisions. Number one was when the Carroll School Board, when I was athletic director, came to me and wanted to fly the football team to Odessa for a playoff. And the thing that happened there was that it was a situation that provided our kid the best opportunity to win. It put us in a situation for our coaches, got back because we had another game. And it was a situation where it needed to be done. And if I had to make that decision again, and it was best for our kid, I'd make that same decision. And the second decision that I made was when I picked up the phone and I called Todd Dodge. And I said, Todd, I said, I want to visit with you about being the head football coach at Carroll High School. And he said, Coach, what kind of procedure are you going to use? Going to use a committee? And I said, Todd, you're talking to the committee. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker came to Carroll in the year 2000 after serving as head coach at Fossil Ridge. He was previously at Carroll Newman Smith and beat Carroll at both Fossil Ridge and Newman Smith. I guess they thought we might as well hire him because we can't beat him. After losing 3 straight games to begin the 2000 season, Carroll won 6 of the next 7 games and advanced to the playoffs, only to be eliminated in the regional finals. In 2001, the record was 10-5, and Carroll was eliminated in the state semifinal game. The first 2 years were just a warm-up for the next 2 years. In 2002, Carroll had a perfect 16-0 record and won the state championship against Smithson Valley, and became the first team in Texas football history to win a state championship after moving up in classification 4A to 5A, and that's quite an accomplishment. In 2003, Carroll again reached the state championship, but was defeated by Katy in a 1-point loss. Carroll's record over the last 2 years, 31-1. One of the things about Coach Dodge is he's got to be the most focused football coach I've ever seen. We can go to lunch and you'd think that he'd talk about price of gasoline or the stock market or Iraq. This guy, all he wants to talk about is football. So let's listen to him.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the South Lake Historical Society for putting this on. Back 24 years ago or so, when I was a junior in high school. I grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, in a very similar situation. Great traditional football town. My high school coach and some people in town put something on just like this. And it was something that I think is very important. We have some of our players, our current players here tonight. And one thing that we always try to instill in them is what came before them. And being proud to be a part of that tradition. One thing that brought back a memory from the clip of the Lufkin game, before, when all of our fans were going to be leaving the parking lot out here to go to Lufkin, there was a gentleman, my wife tells me this story, there was a gentleman that was kind of hanging around. No one really knew who he was. He was obviously a Carroll Dragon fan, and Carroll stuff on, but no one really knew who he was. He was looking for a ride at the game. And everybody was a little bit kind of frightened to take him. I guess he didn't know him. And so finally, right before everybody was going to leave, Aaron Morgan's mom just said, "Come on, hop in with us, we'll give you a ride." And Elizabeth told Miss Morgan, she goes, "Something good's going to happen to Aaron today." And in that game, in that state semifinal game, Aaron had the first 2 interceptions of his career, and of course the one that clinched the victory for us. So good things happen to good people on that. The phone call that Coach Ledbetter was talking about was the most exciting phone call that I think I've ever gotten. The opportunity to come be a part of this. I started my coaching career in 1986, and so the first 6-7 years of my coaching career was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and through the Carroll 88, 92, 93, the whole run through that, and obviously as a young football coach in his profession, knowing exactly what it was about. And then I coached at North Texas and had a chance to come through and recruit some athletes out of Carroll and found out more about, from an outsider looking in, got to compete against Carroll. But when I had the opportunity in 2000 to come to be the head football coach, it was just obviously at that point the highlight of my career. I was asked that spring by someone in the Booster Club, "What's your motto, Coach? What do you want us to put on the T-shirt for next year?" Seems like the Booster Clubs are always looking for a motto so we can sell some T-shirts for the year. And the one thing that I just was couldn't get out of my head is how I was just so proud to be a part of a place that had so much tradition. I grew up in a town that had the opportunity to play at a university that had tradition, and I love being a part of that. Some things came forth, so I told him, I said, put on the T-shirt, protect the tradition, because as long as this is on our watch, that's the only motto we're going to have. And I tell you, there's a lot, guys. I think that those of you who are here that hear us say that all the time, after seeing where this program has come from, that brings on a new meaning. The 2000 season, as was mentioned, we lost our first 3 games. Now, I'll never forget Mr. Warren Davis, who's my good friend now. We were at a Booster Club one night after, I guess, the third loss we had just to open up this great season was to Highland Park, I believe. We were at a Booster Club meeting. He said, "Todd, and I told you when we hired you, when I first met you, I told you I have you back." I said, "I always have you back." He goes, "But I want you to know they're getting awful close." And so the next week we went to Coppell and got our first victory. The coaching staff here at Carroll over the Coppell Cowboys there at their place, and the 2000 team will always be one that's very near and dear to my heart because it was the first team that we had here at Carroll. A bunch that just there was so much trust that was gained as the season progressed. Memories of that year of the Stephenville victory at Charlie's funeral last week. I mentioned that because it really sticks out to me. It's kind of the victory that kind of gave us a little bit of credibility, so to speak, and that had Charlie all over. It was a 16-7, I think. We didn't just light it up offensively that night, but that defense was churning, I tell you. And then the great comeback. We were down 35-7 at one time in that Andrews game, the one that was showed on the clips. And I'll never forget, it was one of those deals you had to laugh to keep from crying, now. And I got the kids together on the sideline. I said, guys, we got an opportunity. I said, we got an opportunity to get beat worse than any Carroll team's ever got beat before. Or we got a chance to have the biggest comeback in school history. So what do you, let's choose one of the two. And they chose, I don't know if it was the biggest comeback, but it was one of the best. I know that, and that's a great memory. The 2001 season, of course, the flight to Odessa was a sweet victory for a lot of reasons. I do remember the conversation on that Thanksgiving week, on the Monday of that Thanksgiving, Coach Ledbetter's office, and I walked in and he said, well, how do you want to go? And I said, well, might as well shoot for the moon, And so I said, oh, I'd like to fly. And he said, that's what we're going to do. And that's what we did. And I know there's a lot of things came out of it, but I want to thank him for supporting us in that, through that. We've talked about that many times, but that was the best thing for kids at that time. But that 2001 game out there, that Dunbar victory that we had against those great athletes that year was a tremendous win for us. And then on into the 2002 season, our football team, and lately I get asked a lot, how are you handling the pressure of being ranked number one this and number one that kind of deal. And I tell people it's no different than it was in 2002 or 2003. It's just that some other people outside the Carroll family are kind of jumping on the bandwagon now, as far as publications and stuff like that. Going into the 2002 season, that group really felt like they had a chance to have an outstanding football team. And regardless of how many A's were beside their name, 4A, 5A, their clock was running down. And so, it was one of those deals when we went into 5A football, they didn't think that you had to just go 6-4 the first year or 7-3, get your feet wet. They had plans on winning the state championship, and that's what we were able to do. Obviously, along the way, there's guys tremendous players on that team, but you got to be lucky sometimes. That catch that Lowrey made. I think anytime you win a state championship, and I'm sure Coach Ledbetter can attest to this, it's probably somewhere along their runs, that you got to be lucky sometime, and you got to have a miraculous thing happen. And that was the one that sticks out in my mind. I've got that picture sitting right behind my desk of that diving catch at Lowrey, and the one that Hanson made and on, and then the tremendous victory in the state championship. But last year's team, the 2003 team, is one that I have so much respect for, that entire football team, because they definitely had the bullseye on the chest. The 2002 team had the luxury of being the new 4A team coming into 5A, and the 2003 team, we had everybody shooting for us and to get back to the state championship. And the one thing that I told those seniors when they left is that, guys, when you're 35, 40 years old, you're sitting around with a bunch of guys and some old boys lying about, well, we went 7-3 when I was a senior in high school. You're going to say we won 15 ball games. There's not a whole lot of people that say that. So, I'm extremely proud of that bunch from last year. It's very ironic, very fitting that there is a tribute to Dragon football going on tonight. And we had our team meeting, our last day of two-a-days was today. And the one thing when Coach Ledbetter hired me, and I said, well, I knew that he and I would be working together for a few years. I was going to make sure that I took advantage of learning as much as I could from him. And I asked him one time, one of the best things you did outside of X's and O's and stuff that you feel was important to the success of your program? And I think it was 88. It may have been the 92 season, but I believe it was 88 that he told me. He said that I had a players only meeting, me and the players only, on the last day of two-a-days, and we locked up the field house, and we just basically cleared the air. We got a chance to tell each other how we felt about each other, what we felt about our team, and we've been doing that, Coach. We've been doing that ever since, and we've won a lot of football games since you gave me that suggestion. And I appreciate that, and it's something that will always go on that we're here. We met today for about 2.5 hours in the weight room, and every kid gets to get up and talk about what it means to be a Carroll Dragon. And I tell you what, it's an amazing deal, and it's not the norm. What we're a part of, what we have here in this community with this football program, and what Coach Johnson, Coach Lowrey, and many other great coaches, great players have built. You know, they started that dirt road, and right now, the coach and staff, the players, we're kind of right along that super highway. You know, these guys paved the way for us. You know, and that's where protect the tradition comes in. Is that we've got to protect what they built, and we continue to build. And I want you to know that we're very excited to start the 2004 season. We've got tremendous expectations for ourselves, and I told the media people that want to ask about those things, we're not foolish enough to know that these number one rankings or whatever, they won't fall by the wayside. It's what those young men in that field house is what they believe in themselves. Coach Ledbetter said it when he talked. It's how they feel and how they believe what they can get done. Those are things that count. And one thing that we're going to do this year, as we always have, is we're going to enjoy the journey. We're going to enjoy the journey. We're not going to put, the cart before the horse. And we've got a tremendous non-district schedule. We play Midland League, we play Coppell, we play Plano East, and we're very excited. We've got an opportunity to have a tremendous football team. The one thing, I'll leave you with this, the one thing that we talk about in our program is reaching our potential. God gave all of us a certain amount of ability, and we don't ever want to be, that group that, 10, 15 years from now in Southlake that they're going, well, 2014, well, they had a lot of potential. We want to make sure that we knock the top off of it. And these kids have been working awfully hard. And I want to appreciate and just tell you that we, on behalf of my staff and my football team, we want to say thank you for all your support. Thank you to the Historical Society for putting this on. I think this is it's an awesome night. Appreciate it.
He made one mistake. He said Coppell and Sloppell. To thank the following sponsors for helping to make tonight's program possible. Alpha Graphics on Southlake Boulevard. Southlake dentist John Michael Tate and his family. He's the next player. Mayor and Mrs. Andy Watkins. The Southlake Fitness Center. Robert Williams of Edward Jones Investments and Ken Merritt of Goldman Sachs. The Stacy family of Stacy Furniture. I. Fratelli Pizza. Tom Thumb, the Southlake Times, the Hess family of Prestige Gunite, that's old Leroy, and the Star Telegram. And at the end of the program, we can all go down to the cafeteria and have a little pizza. Now we're going to do something. We asked for someone to bring the oldest letter jacket. So if Eddie Cheatham, you want to come forward here? You got to be the guy because you were the first quarterback at Carroll. One of the things that you might want to know, Eddie's dad was on the school board when they hired Mr. Johnson. And he's 91, and we hoped that he'd be here tonight, but we can understand why he couldn't. Also, I want to be sure and recognize Anita Roberson, who has really been the workhorse behind this whole thing. She spent a lot of time making phone calls, making sure that everything was set up, so she certainly stand up, Anita. We show her a round of applause. Okay, she's still there, she's reminding me. How about any former players who are here, just stand up. We were gonna let you go up against the wall, but we'll just let you stand up. Any former players, Eddie, you lead them up.